Get her out. Cameron Price pointed toward the rain-streaked glass doors as though the woman standing before him were something the storm had dragged inside. Her card was declined. She does not belong here. The espresso machine hissed behind the counter. Ceramic cups clicked against saucers, and the low murmur of morning conversation faded into an uneasy quiet. Evelyn Hartwell stood beneath the warm pendant lights with one hand resting on the strap of her plain leather bag and the other holding a card that had worked everywhere until that morning. Her cream-colored coat was damp from the Portland rain. A loose strand of chestnut hair clung to her cheek. She looked tired, embarrassed, and completely alone. Cameron folded his arms. He was the regional manager of Common Table Coffee, and he wore authority the way some men wore expensive cologne, too heavily and for everyone else to endure. "You have held up the line long enough," he said. "Leave before I call security." A few customers looked away. One man near the window raised his phone, not to help, but to record. A woman in a tailored business suit sighed and checked her watch. Then a wooden chair scraped across the floor. Daniel Mercer rose from a small table near the back, where his 8-year-old daughter, Sophie, sat beside a cooling mug of cocoa and a small cup of coffee. Daniel wore scuffed work boots, faded jeans, and a navy jacket with a maintenance company logo stitched above the pocket. Nothing about him suggested power. Nothing about him suggested money. But when he stepped between Cameron and Evelyn, the room changed. Her card failed, Daniel said calmly. Her dignity did not. Cameron gave a short laugh. "This is none of your business. It became my business when you decided to humiliate her in public. Sit down." No, 3 words. 3 choices. 3 chances for Daniel to look away. He took none of them. Rain tapped steadily against the windows, soft but persistent, while the smell of roasted coffee and wet pavement hung in the air. Sophie watched her father with wide blue eyes, one hand resting on the old instant camera that had belonged to her mother. Cameron stepped closer. "You want to leave with her?" Daniel glanced back at Sophie, then returned his gaze to Cameron. "Then you will have to throw me out too." Behind him, Sophie quietly raised the camera. The shutter clicked before anyone noticed. Nobody knew that Evelyn could have purchased the entire building before the next cup of coffee finished brewing. Nobody knew that before sunset, 3 black sedans would pull up outside those same doors. And nobody could have imagined that when her true name was finally spoken, the most powerful person in the room would not be the billionaire. It would be the single father who refused her reward. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Share your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe dignity matters, even when nobody important seems to be watching, take a moment to like and subscribe. Stories of grace, second chances, and quiet courage can still change the way people see one another. Now, let us return to Daniel Mercer earlier that morning, before one quiet decision changed everything. At 7:13, Daniel had exactly $38 in his wallet, 1 remaining dose in Sophie's asthma inhaler, and a job interview he could not afford to lose. He parked his 12-year-old pickup beneath a dripping maple tree across from the coffee shop and shut off the engine. The heater fan went silent, leaving only the rain drumming against the roof. Sophie tightened the red scarf around her neck and lifted the old camera from her lap. "Mom said every bad day has one good picture hiding inside it," she said. Daniel looked at his daughter, then at the overdue electric bill folded beside the gearshift. He smiled anyway. "Then we better find it." Neither of them knew that the first picture was already waiting inside. Daniel slipped the overdue electric bill into the glove compartment before Sophie could notice the red warning stamped across the top. "Ready?" he asked. "Ready," she said, lifting the instant camera by its frayed strap. They hurried through the rain and crossed the narrow street beneath a sky the color of cold steel. Water gathered along the curb and splashed around Daniel's worn work boots. He held the coffee shop. Door opened for Sophie, and a small brass bell chimed above them. Warm air met their faces. The room smelled of cinnamon, dark roast, and wet wool. Soft music played beneath the murmur of morning customers, while the espresso machine released sharp bursts of steam behind the counter. Daniel checked the clock above the pastry case. 7:18. His interview was scheduled for 8:30 in an office 2 blocks away. The maintenance contract covered 6 commercial buildings and promised steady work for at least a year. It would not make him wealthy, but it might keep the electricity on, replace Sophie's nearly empty inhaler, and allow him to stop choosing which bill deserved to be paid first. Can we sit by the window? Sophie asked. Daniel glanced toward a small table near the back. That one gives us a better view of the door. I cannot be late. Sophie nodded as though she understood more than an 8-year-old should. At the counter, Daniel ordered one plain coffee for himself and one small hot chocolate for Sophie. He hesitated when the cashier gave him the total. Actually, cancel the coffee. Water is fine for me. Sophie looked up immediately. Dad, I already had coffee at home. The coffee maker is broken. Daniel gave her a quiet smile. Then I had imaginary coffee. The cashier, Maya Bennett, noticed the exchange. She was young, with tired hazel eyes and a name tag pinned slightly crooked to her green apron. Without saying anything, she removed Daniel's coffee from the register, filled a small cup anyway, and placed it beside Sophie's hot chocolate. We made an extra one, she whispered. Daniel understood kindness when he saw it. Thank you. Do the same for someone else, Maya replied. He carried the drinks to the back table, unaware that those 6 words would return to him before the morning ended. Sophie set the camera between them and opened her small sketchbook. On one page, she had drawn 3 boxes beneath the words things worth remembering. The first held a sunrise. The second showed Daniel fixing a neighbor's porch light. The third was empty. What goes there? He asked. I do not know yet. She looked around the room. Something good. Daniel stirred her cocoa and pushed it closer. Good things do not always announce themselves. Outside, a black sedan slowed near the curb, then continued through the intersection. Daniel barely noticed. His attention had moved to Sophie's breathing. There was a faint whistle beneath each exhale, almost hidden by the music and the clatter of cups. Chest tight, he asked. Sophie shook her head too quickly. Just the cold air. Daniel reached into her backpack and checked the inhaler. 1 dose remained. He closed his hand around it, feeling the weight of everything he could not control. We will stop at the pharmacy after my interview. What if the job takes all day? Then we celebrate all day. Sophie smiled, but Daniel looked down at the $38 in his wallet and silently calculated medicine, gas, and groceries. At 7:31, the brass bell above the entrance rang again. A white woman in her mid-30s stepped inside wearing a cream-colored coat darkened by rain. Her chestnut hair was loosely pinned, and although her clothes were simple, she carried herself with a calm that did not belong to someone lost or afraid. She paused near the doorway and looked back toward the street, where a black sedan had stopped half a block away. A final battery warning flashed across her phone before the screen went dark. She slipped it into her bag and entered the line beneath the name Evelyn Hartwell, though no one in the coffee shop knew it yet. Sophie quietly reached for her camera. Dad, she whispered. I think the good picture just walked in. Sophie lifted the camera, but Daniel gently lowered it before she could press the shutter. People deserve to be asked before they become a memory, he said. Sophie considered that, then nodded and placed the camera beside her cocoa. Across the room, Evelyn joined the line and studied the coffee shop with the quiet attention of someone who noticed more than menus and prices. She saw fingerprints on the glass display case, tired shoulders behind polite smiles, and the way Maya's posture stiffened whenever Cameron Price stepped behind the counter. At 5 o'clock that afternoon, Evelyn was expected to approve Hartwell Community Holdings' acquisition of all 42 common table coffee locations. Her attorneys had reviewed the financial statements. Her consultants had praised the brand. Every presentation described a welcoming company built around neighborhood values. Evelyn had learned long ago that reports revealed what leaders wanted the world to believe, while ordinary mornings revealed the truth. That was why she had dismissed her driver several blocks away, silenced her phone, and entered without an assistant or a recognizable designer label. She did not expect special treatment. She wanted to see how the company treated someone it believed had no influence at all. Next, Maya called. Evelyn stepped forward and ordered a medium coffee with cream and a blueberry muffin. She removed a plain black card from her bag and tapped it against the reader. The machine beeped. Declined appeared across the small screen. I am sorry, Maya said. Sometimes the reader does that. You can try again. Evelyn inserted the card. Another beep. Another rejection. She reached for her phone, but the screen remained dark. The battery had died during the drive. I have another card, she said, searching an inner pocket of her bag. Cameron appeared beside Maya before she could find it. His silver name badge caught the pendant light as he looked from the waiting line to Evelyn's damp coat. "What is the problem?" "The reader declined her card," Maya answered. "I was going to try the register near the pickup counter." No, Cameron's voice was sharp enough to turn several heads. "We do not hold up paying customers because someone came in unprepared." Evelyn looked at him calmly. "It will take less than a minute." "That is what everyone says." Cameron glanced at the man behind her, who wore an expensive raincoat and an impatient expression. "Some people have places to be." The man sighed. "She has been standing there forever." It had been less than 30 seconds. Maya reached beneath the counter for the second card reader. Cameron placed his hand over it. "I said no." Evelyn's expression changed, not with fear, but recognition. She had seen that kind of authority before. It was the confidence of a person who believed kindness was optional when no powerful witness was present. "I can leave my identification while I get another form of payment," she offered. Cameron laughed quietly. "That is not how this works." "She is trying to pay," Maya said. "Stay out of it," he replied. The room grew still around the edges. Spoons slowed. Voices softened. Daniel checked the clock. 7:37. He had 53 minutes before his interview, and every sensible part of him said to remain seated. Then Cameron took the coffee from Maya's hand and poured it into the sink. "You need to leave," he told Evelyn. Sophie looked at her father. She did not ask him to do anything. She did not have to. Daniel saw the same question in her eyes that had lived in his own heart since the day her mother died. What is dignity worth when protecting it costs you something? Cameron pointed toward the rain-streaked doors. "Get her out." Daniel's chair scraped across the floor. He crossed the room without raising his voice. "Her card failed," he said. "Her dignity did not." Cameron turned slowly. "This is none of your business. It became my business when you decided to embarrass her. Sit down." "No." The espresso machine released a long breath of steam. Rain tapped steadily against the windows, and the entire room seemed to lean toward the space between them. Cameron glanced at Daniel's worn jacket and work boots. "You want to leave with her?" Daniel held his gaze. "Then you will have to throw me out too." Behind him, Sophie quietly raised the instant camera. This time, Daniel did not stop her. The shutter clicked before anyone noticed. Cameron gave a dry laugh, unaware that Sophie had captured the moment. "Fine. Pay for her order if you care so much." Daniel walked to the register and opened his wallet. $38. He had counted it twice in the truck. Medicine, gas, groceries. 3 needs competing for the same small mercy. "Medium coffee and a blueberry muffin," Maya said quietly. Daniel handed her a $20 bill. She hesitated before taking it. "You do not have to do this." "I know. That was what made it an act of kindness." Evelyn stepped closer. "Please do not pay for me. It is already done. Give me your name. I will return it." Daniel shook his head. "Do the same for someone else." Maya looked up at those words, recognizing the kindness she had offered him only minutes earlier. For one brief moment, something gentle moved through the room, passed from one person to another without permission from money or status. Cameron ruined it. "Your little performance is over," he said. "Take your drinks and go." Daniel turned toward him. "I have an interview 2 blocks from here, and I am already leaving. But she stays if she wants to stay." Cameron's eyes narrowed at the maintenance company logo stitched above Daniel's pocket. "What kind of interview?" Daniel said nothing. He did not owe the man an answer. Cameron stepped behind the counter and picked up the phone. Daniel returned to the back table, unaware that the regional manager of Common Table Coffee knew the property manager scheduled to interview him. Sophie slipped the fresh photograph into her backpack before anyone noticed. Its colors were still developing, but the truth inside it was already clear. At 7:48, Cameron placed a call and described Daniel as aggressive, disruptive, and unsafe around customers. By 7:51, the opportunity Daniel had spent weeks hoping for was gone. He did not know it yet. He only knew Sophie had begun breathing too carefully. "Sweetheart," he asked. She shook her head too quickly. "I am okay." The faint whistle beneath her breath told him otherwise. Daniel reached into her backpack, removed the inhaler, and checked the counter. 1 dose remained. He pressed it into her hand. "Use it." Sophie stared at the small plastic device. "But the refill costs more than we have now." "Use it, Sophie." "Dad, medicine is not something we save for a better day." She obeyed. Daniel watched until her breathing began to settle, then folded the empty inhaler into the front pocket of her backpack. Evelyn stood near the counter, watching him spend the last protection he had saved for his daughter after spending part of the money meant to replace it on a stranger's breakfast. Her throat tightened. She had met men who donated millions with cameras pointed at them. She had listened to executives speak about compassion from polished stages. But Daniel had given from scarcity and asked for nothing. His phone vibrated against the table. He glanced at the unfamiliar local number and answered. Daniel Mercer speaking. A professional voice came through the receiver. Mr. Mercer, this is the property management office. I am calling about your 8:30 interview. Daniel looked toward the clock. Yes, ma'am. I will be there early. A pause followed. I am sorry, but the appointment has been canceled. We received a report concerning an incident involving you at a nearby business. The company has decided not to move forward. Daniel's eyes shifted toward Cameron, who lowered his gaze and concealed a satisfied smile. I understand, Daniel said. Thank you for letting me know. He ended the call and placed the phone face down. Sophie had heard every word. So had Evelyn. Daniel straightened his shoulders, gathered Sophie's cocoa and his small coffee, and said the one thing a proud man says when he has no safe place to put disappointment. It is all right. But Evelyn knew it was not. Evelyn looked from Daniel's steady face to the satisfied expression Cameron tried to hide, and something inside her settled into place. She had spent years learning how powerful people concealed cruelty behind policy, procedure, and polished language. Cameron had not cost Daniel his interview with an insult. He had done it with a phone call, a false description, and the confidence that no one important was watching. He was wrong. I am sorry, Evelyn said. Daniel adjusted Sophie's scarf and lifted her backpack. You did not make the call. This happened because you helped me. No, he replied. It happened because he wanted it to happen. Cameron looked up sharply, but Daniel did not give him the satisfaction of another confrontation. He thanked Maya, held the door open for Sophie, and stepped into the rain. Evelyn followed them beneath the narrow awning. The morning air had turned colder, carrying the smell of wet pavement and exhaust from downtown traffic. Daniel opened the passenger door of his old pickup and helped Sophie climb inside. Please, Evelyn said. Give me a way to repay you. Daniel rested one hand on the truck door. You already thanked me. That does not replace your interview. Neither would money. She studied him. You do not even know what I could offer. Daniel glanced through the window at Sophie, who held the empty inhaler in both hands. That is exactly why I do not want it. His words were not bitter. They were quiet, almost gentle, and that made them harder to dismiss. Evelyn had met people who refused help because of pride. Daniel was different. He refused because he would not allow kindness to become a transaction. Then let me at least pay for her medicine, she said. Daniel's expression changed. For 1 second, the father in him wanted to say yes. Evelyn saw it clearly. Then he closed the passenger door. Do the same for someone else, he repeated. He walked around the truck and reached for the driver's door. Sophie lowered her window. Can I take one now? She asked. Daniel looked at Evelyn, then gave a small nod. Sophie raised the camera and pressed the shutter. A second instant photograph slid into her hand. The image was still pale, but she carefully wrote 4 words across the white border and held it through the open window. This is for you. Evelyn accepted it with both hands. Thank you. Sophie smiled. Are you going to be all right? Evelyn looked at the little girl, then at the father who had just lost something important and still refused to make anyone feel indebted. I think I am now. Daniel climbed behind the wheel, pulled into traffic, and disappeared through the rain. Evelyn stood beneath the awning until the taillights vanished. Then she walked half a block toward the corner. A black sedan turned onto the street and stopped several yards beyond the coffee shop, hidden from its front windows by a delivery truck. A tall man in a charcoal coat stepped out, holding an umbrella and a portable charger. Ms. Hartwell, he said, relief breaking through his professional calm. We have been searching for you. The board moved the acquisition meeting to 5 o'clock, and legal needs your final approval. Inside the coffee shop, Cameron had already returned to his office. He never saw the sedan. He never heard her name. Evelyn looked back through the rain-streaked glass and saw him speaking sharply to Maya. Tell the board I will be there, she said. But the agreement is not being signed today. Her assistant lowered his voice. Should we terminate the acquisition? Evelyn switched on her phone. Dozens of missed calls filled the screen. Not yet. I want employee records, tip reports, customer complaints, and security footage from every location. How far back? 3 years. She stepped into the sedan, still holding the developing photograph. Slowly, the image appeared. Daniel beside his old pickup, Sophie watching through the open window, and Evelyn standing beneath the rain as if she were seeing ordinary goodness for the first time. Across the white border, in Sophie's uneven handwriting, were 4 words that changed Evelyn's plan. Dad helped someone today. Cameron believed he had driven an ordinary woman out of his store. He had no idea she was now deciding whether the company he represented deserved to survive. By 9:15, Daniel had dropped Sophie at school with a promise he was not yet certain he could keep. "I will bring your new inhaler before dismissal," he told her. Sophie searched his face, then nodded and disappeared through the red doors beneath a crowd of raincoats and backpacks. Daniel remained at the curb until she was safely inside. Then he drove to the neighborhood pharmacy, where the pharmacist recognized him from years of late-night prescriptions and worried questions. Daniel placed the empty inhaler on the counter. "I can pay part of it today," he said. "The rest on Friday." The pharmacist studied him for a moment, then prepared a short emergency refill aloud under Sophie's prescription. "This will cover her until the full refill is ready," she said. Daniel thanked her twice and left with $16 in his wallet, enough gasoline for the week if nothing else went wrong. Across town, Evelyn sat at the head of a glass conference table while her legal team opened files that had already been under review for 6 weeks. Her company had not begun investigating Common Table Coffee that morning. The acquisition process had uncovered missing tip reports, inconsistent payroll records, and employee complaints that had been dismissed without explanation. What happened to Evelyn had not started the investigation. It had completed the pattern. "We have reports from 11 locations," an attorney said. Most complaints were redirected to regional management. Cameron's name appeared on one document after another. Evelyn placed Sophie's photograph beside the folder. "Find the employees who try to speak," she said, "and make sure no one loses a job for telling the truth." At the coffee shop, Maya waited until Cameron entered his office, then called the number printed on Daniel's maintenance invoice. "Mr. Mercer?" she whispered. "This is Maya." Daniel heard the fear beneath her voice. "Are you safe? For now? What happened this morning happens to employees too. He changes timesheets. He keeps part of our tips. Anyone who complains gets fewer hours." She explained that records were stored on the office computer and that Daniel's old maintenance credentials might still open the service room behind Cameron's office. "You could get close enough to copy them," she said. "It would take 10 minutes. Daniel tightened his hand around the steering wheel. "No," Maya's voice fell. "Then there is nothing I can do." "That is not what I said." Daniel looked at the emergency inhaler on the passenger seat. "Print whatever you can legally access. Write down dates, names, and amounts. File a formal complaint with the State Labor Bureau. He will fire me." "Maybe," Daniel said gently. "But if we enter that office in secret, he will make the story about us. Truth should not have to sneak through the back door." Before noon, Maya submitted an online complaint and named Daniel as a witness. A state labor investigator already reviewing related complaints called her less than an hour later. Because the acquisition review had already produced similar reports, the investigator agreed to meet Maya at the coffee shop at 5 o'clock before Cameron could close the store or remove records. Maya asked Daniel to return. He hesitated, thinking of Sophie and the trouble that had already followed him. Then he answered, "I will be there." At 3:20, Daniel picked Sophie up from school and showed her the emergency inhaler. Relief softened her face. "You kept your promise. I'm trying to make a habit of it." He explained that they needed to stop at the coffee shop so he could support Maya during an official meeting. Sophie touched the camera inside her backpack, where the first photograph remained safely tucked between 2 pages of her sketchbook. At 4:42, Cameron received notice that a state labor investigator would arrive before 5. At 4:45, he found Daniel's name on Maya's witness statement. At 4:47, realizing they were both on their way back, he picked up the phone and called the police. The first patrol car stopped outside Common Table Coffee at 4:53, its red and blue lights washing across the rain-darkened windows without a siren. Daniel stood near the pickup counter with Maya's signed complaint in his hand, waiting for the state labor investigator scheduled to arrive at 5. Sophie sat at the back table, finishing her homework beside a fresh mug of cocoa. The emergency inhaler from the pharmacy rested safely in the front pocket of her backpack. Cameron emerged from his office before the officers reached the counter, wearing an expression of practiced concern. "That is him," he said, pointing at Daniel. "He threatened me this morning, returned after being told to stay away, and demanded money in exchange for silence." Daniel did not move. "That is not true." "Daniel Mercer?" the older officer asked. "Yes, sir. Place the envelope on the counter and keep your hands where I can see them." Daniel obeyed without argument. Cameron folded his arms as if calmness belonged to him. He knew how to enter the service area. He used to maintain this building. Maya stepped forward. He never entered the office. Cameron turned sharply. "Stay out of this." "No," Daniel said quietly. "She has stayed out of it long enough." The second officer looked at the sealed complaint. "Mr. Mercer, why did you return to the store?" "Estate labor." Investigator asked Maya to meet here at 5. She requested that I attend as a witness. "Did you ask Mr. Price for money?" "No." "Did you threaten him?" "No." "Then what is in the envelope?" Payroll records Maya could legally access, her written statement, and my witness declaration. Rain rattled against the windows. The grinder behind the counter stopped, and the customers near the entrance fell silent. Cameron lifted his chin. "He is lying. Check the security footage." Maya reached for the store tablet. "I tried. The morning footage has been locked." "Company policy," Cameron said quickly. The brass bell above the door chimed. Evelyn stepped inside wearing the same cream-colored coat from that morning, her chestnut hair damp at the shoulders. No attorney followed her. No assistant stood beside her. To everyone in the room, she was still only the woman whose card had failed. Daniel saw her and shook his head. "You should leave." Evelyn stopped. "Why?" "Because he will pull you into this." "I am already part of it." "Not like this." Daniel glanced toward the officers, then back at her. Even with his reputation balanced on another man's lie, he was still trying to protect the stranger he believed had no power. Cameron pointed toward Evelyn. "Ask her." He caused a scene over her, then used it to pressure me. Sophie stood so quickly that her chair scraped across the floor. "My dad did not pressure anyone." "Sophie," Daniel said gently, staying near the table. She opened her backpack and removed the first instant photograph she had taken that morning, the one tucked safely between the pages of her sketchbook. "Mom said pictures remember when people lie." She carried it to the older officer. The image showed Cameron pointing toward the door, Evelyn standing near the counter, and Daniel several feet away with his hands open at his sides. There was no threat in his posture, only restraint. The officer studied the photograph, then looked at Cameron. "This does not match what you told us." Maya unlocked her personal phone. "I recorded part of the argument on my personal phone. You can hear Mr. Mercer refusing money." Cameron's face tightened. "That recording was unauthorized." "It may still help establish what happened," the officer replied. He handed the photograph back to Sophie, who returned it to her backpack. Evelyn looked at the clock above the pastry case. 4:59. Outside, 3 black sedans turned onto the block and stopped beneath the glowing coffee shop sign. Cameron noticed them through the window, but he did not understand. "Not yet." "And who exactly are you?" he asked Evelyn. She met his eyes. "Someone who came back to see whether you would tell the truth when you believed I still had no power." The clock struck 5. The front door opened again, and this time the people entering carried legal folders, labor records, and the authority Cameron had spent all day pretending belonged to him. The first person through the door was the state labor investigator, a white-haired woman carrying a government identification badge and a weatherproof case. Behind her came Evelyn's assistant, 2 attorneys, 3 members of the acquisition team, and a representative from Common Table Coffee's current ownership board. No one applauded. No one needed to. The room simply emptied of sound. Cameron looked from the legal folders to Evelyn, and for the first time that day, his confidence had nowhere to stand. "Ms. Hartwell," her assistant said, "the acquisition team is assembled." Daniel turned toward Evelyn. Maya covered her mouth with one hand. Cameron gave a nervous laugh. "Hartwell." Evelyn removed her damp cream-colored coat and handed it to her assistant. Beneath it, she wore a tailored navy suit, simple and precise. Nothing about her expression celebrated his fear. Real power did not need to enjoy another person's humiliation. "Evelyn Hartwell," she said, "founder and chief executive officer of Hartwell Community Holdings." Cameron's face lost its color. "You are the buyer?" "I was considering becoming one." The espresso machine clicked off behind the counter. Rainwater traced slow lines down the windows while the current ownership representative opened a folder. "Mr. Price," he said, "you were suspended effective immediately pending an independent investigation." Cameron took one step forward. This morning was a misunderstanding. Evelyn opened the records her legal team had reviewed for 6 weeks. Missing employee tips are not a misunderstanding. Altered timesheets are not a misunderstanding. Retaliation against workers who report misconduct is not a misunderstanding. She turned another page. And filing a false police report against a witness is not leadership. The older officer glanced at the call records and security documentation provided by the legal team, then addressed Daniel. "Mr. Mercer, based on what we have reviewed, you are not being detained." Daniel nodded once. He did not smile. He did not look at Cameron with triumph. Grace is most visible when revenge is available and refused. Cameron turned toward Evelyn. "I am sorry. I would never have spoken to you that way if I had known who you were." Evelyn's voice remained calm. "You should never have spoken to anyone that way." She announced that Hartwell Community Holdings would not proceed under the existing terms. Any future acquisition would require a full labor audit, repayment of withheld tips, protection for every employee who cooperated, and the removal of managers connected to retaliation. Then she faced Daniel. One of her attorneys placed a written compensation agreement on the counter. "Mr. Mercer," Evelyn said, "you lost a job opportunity, spent money meant for your daughter's medicine, and returned as a witness when silence would have been safer. I would like to compensate you." "No," Daniel said. The word was quiet, but it stopped the room. Evelyn studied him. "You have not seen the amount. The amount does not change the answer." Sophie approached her father and placed the first photograph in his hand. Daniel looked at the image of himself standing between Evelyn and humiliation, then set it gently on the counter. "Return every dollar these employees earned. Protect the people who told the truth. Then use whatever you plan to give me to create an emergency fund for parents who have to choose between medicine, rent, and groceries." Evelyn glanced towards Sophie's backpack, where the emergency inhaler rested. "You need that help too." "Yes," Daniel answered. "But I am not the only one." "No." Applause followed. No phones rose to record him. The room simply became still because wealth had revealed a billionaire, but dignity had revealed the stronger person. Evelyn closed the agreement. "Then we will build the fund." Outside, the rain began to soften. Inside, Maya stood taller, Cameron lowered his eyes, and an entire coffee shop learned that respect given only to the powerful was never respect at all. 3 months later, the sign above the coffee shop no longer read Common Table Coffee. In its place, painted in warm gold letters against dark green wood, were the words Common Ground Coffee. Inside, the tension that once lived beneath the pendant lights had disappeared. Employees kept every dollar of their tips. Schedules were posted fairly. A small brass plaque beside the register explained the new emergency fund for working parents facing medical bills, overdue rent, or empty refrigerators. Maya Bennett now managed the store, reviewing every request privately, with dignity and as little paperwork as possible. The labor investigation had recovered thousands of dollars in withheld wages, and several employees who had once been afraid to speak now helped shape the company's new policies. Daniel had refused